7-6. Today we're going to be talking about the slope-intercept form. So a few lessons ago we talked about the rate of change. So we were talking about the change in a line from one point to the next. Last lesson we talked about slope, so we're talking about the steepness of a line. And this lesson we're kind of going to take slope to the next level by adding in what's called a Y-intercept. So when you see the title, Slope-Intercept Form, so that means that we are going to have a formula. So form means we're going to have a formula. So that means we're going to have to pick out things from that formula, also put things into the formula and solve for certain things. So basically, whenever you use this form, it's when you have a slope and a y-intercept. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about those things real quick. So first of all, like I said, slope is the steepness of a line, which we dealt with last lesson. So the change in y over the change in x. And a y-intercept, so this is new for you guys. A y-intercept is where a graphed line crosses the y-axis. So first of all, we need to figure out which one's the y-axis. So we have the horizontal axis, which is the x-axis, and the vertical axis, which is the y-axis. So basically, where the line crosses the y-axis, that point, exactly where it crosses it, that is the y-intercept. Now in this case, our y-intercept is going to be 2, because the graph crosses crosses the y-axis at 1, 2. So at positive 2. So if it crossed here, that'd be the y-intercept is negative 1. If it crossed here, the y-intercept would be 4. Okay, so it has to be crossing this line. Alright? So basically, when you take these two parts, when you take the slope and you take the y-intercept, you can actually make your whole graph. You don't have to plug in x values and y values. All you'll have to do is basically find your y-intercept. So in this case, your y-intercept was 2. You'd put a dot on 2 on the y-axis, and then you would use your slope. Like if your slope was 1, up 1 over 1, and that would give you 2 points. You connect them and make a line. So we are going to be touching on that as well. So first thing first, our slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So now is the time to start getting this formula kind of into your head, because you're going to be using it all the way up through pre-calculus and algebra 2 and all that stuff. So we'll want to make sure to start committing it to memory. It's not going to be something that you're going to use only once and never use it again. So it's going to come back a lot, and you're not going to get a cheat sheet or anything like that. So this is going to have to be in your head. So now when you're looking at the formula, that means that there are variables in your formulas, and you're going to have to know what those variables stand for. So in this case, let's go through each of these variables. This y value. So the y is the y value of a point on the line. So like you have the ordered pair x, y, it's going to be a y value. So that's going to be the y. The m is the slope. So like I said last lesson, slope is represented by the letter m. So m would be the slope, so the rise over run. A lot of times you're going to see a fraction right here before your x value, but not always. Sometimes it's a whole number. The x is the x value of a point on the line. So in the ordered pair x, y, this would be your x and this would be your y, and it would go in those places on the line. And then b is representing the y-intercept. So obviously, don't get this confused, because just because this is a y, it does not mean that's a y-intercept. It's not. The letter b represents the y-intercept, or where the line crosses at the y-axis. So let's go ahead and look at 3 examples real quick. This example, I have y equals 2x plus 1. So this would be an example of what you would see. They plug in, that's why it's called the slope-intercept form. They plugged in the slope, they plugged in the y-intercept. So in this case, a question would be something like, what is the x value, or sorry, what is the y-intercept and what is the slope? In this case, all you're doing is pulling out the slope, pulling out the y-intercept. Just showing that you know where it is in the equation. So the slope would be 2. Because the slope is the value, the coefficient of your x. So anytime you have an x and there's a number before it, that's going to be your coefficient or your slope. So the slope is 2, and then the y-intercept is a positive 1. Okay, so it's positive 1. Let's look at this example. It says y equals 2x minus 1. In this case, our slope would be 2 because 2 is the coefficient of x, and the y-intercept would be negative 1. So in the formula, we have a plus b. So anytime there's a subtraction sign there, that means that your y-intercept is going to be negative, because in the original formula, it should be positive. So if it's negative, then that just means that your y-intercept is going to be negative. So our y-intercept in this case is not a positive 1, it's a negative 1. So be very careful, look at the sign in front of that value. Now in this case, we have y minus 2x equals 1. Now the first thing you need to realize is the fact that it's not in slope-intercept form. It's not in the y equals mx plus b, because in this case we have a y minus mx equals b. So that's not the same equation. So if you see an x value and a y value together on one side, you need to get rid of that x value and put it on the other side along with your constant term, or just your number by itself. So in this case we have y minus 2x, so we're going to have to add 2x to do the opposite operation to get it on the other side. And as soon as I do that, I'll get y equals 2x plus 1. So our slope would be 2, and our y-intercept is 1. So let's go ahead and do some more examples. Okay, for these first 4 examples, what we're going to do is literally just pick out the y-intercept and pick out the slope. Because right now, this is kind of the beginning of when you're seeing slope and y-intercept and the slope-intercept form and all that stuff. So right now, they want to really make sure that you understand the parts of it and understand how to get it into slope-intercept form and graph from the slope-intercept form, so that later on when you see it in high school and things like that, you're going to be familiar with the formula. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the first one. It says y equals 8x plus 6. So we want to find the slope, or m. I'm going to put it in parentheses so you're starting to see the variable n representing slope. And then we have the y-intercept, which is represented by the variable b. So we need to go ahead and look here. And anytime we're looking for our slope, we find the x value first. So here's our x value. Now, all you need to do is look at that term that comes before the x value. In this case, it is 8. So that means our slope is 8. Alright, now we need to go ahead and find the term that's by itself. So in this case, our term that's by itself is 6. But I want to go ahead and look at my sign in my problem just to make sure it's positive, because if it's subtracting, then that would mean that it would be a negative 6, not a positive 6. But in this case, we're adding, so it will be a positive 6. Alright, let's go ahead and look at number 2. It says y equals x minus 3. So we're going to look for our slope, which is represented by m, and our y-intercept, which is represented by b. Alright, so to find the slope term, we need to find the x term. So here's my x. Now, whatever number that comes before x is the slope. But in this case, there is no number. So that's when you're going to have to remember back when we talked about variables, and that the coefficient, or the number that's kind of linked to the variable or multiplied by the variable, that would be the coefficient. In this case, our coefficient is 8. If there's not 1, it's an understood 1. So that means our slope is 1. Okay, and now let's go ahead and look at our y-intercept, which is a term that's by itself. So in this case, our term that's by itself is 3, and I want to check the sign to see if it's positive or negative. Since we're subtracting 3, it means that it's a negative 3 is our y-intercept. Alright, number 3. We have negative 9x plus 9, or plus y equals negative 5. The first thing that I'm noticing right off the bat is that the x term and the y term are together. But in our formula, it's y equals mx plus b. So that means that the y and the x term should be separated by the equal sign. So what I'm going to do is try to get this 9x term over to the other side. So it can be with the y-intercept or the constant term. So in order to do that, I need to do the inverse operation. So in this case, this term is negative. So we want to add it to both sides of the equal sign, so that we will be able to put it in y-intercept form, or slope-intercept form. So we have y equals 9x minus 5. So here's our formula. I just want to circle it so that you can see our new formula. Now, what I did here, even though it's negative 5 plus 9, and you might want to write negative 5 plus 9, I put it as 9x minus 5 just so that I can keep it in the formula, which is y equals mx plus b. So the x term comes before the b, so I just went ahead and put it before the b, just so I can keep it in the same form all the time. So now we need to go ahead and find the slope, which is represented by m, and the y-intercept, which is represented by b. So let's look at our equation now. So we have to find our x term to find the slope. So our x term is here, so I'm going to go ahead and look for the coefficient, or the number that comes before the x term, and that is 9. So my slope is 9. And now I need to go ahead and look for the term that's by itself, which is 5. But I need to check the sign. And in this case, we're subtracting 5, so that means it's going to be a negative 5 y-intercept. Okay, let's look at this last example. We have y minus 6 equals 1/2 x. Now, the first thing that I notice is that my 6 or my constant term is over here with my y. This y needs to be by itself if we're going to look at the slope-intercept form, okay? So we need just y equals, nothing else. In this case, we have y minus 6, so we have to get rid of this negative 6 term. So since it's negative and we're subtracting it, we need to go ahead and add it to both sides because that's our inverse operation. So we're going to add 6 on both sides. Alright, so I'm going to rewrite my equation now. I would not keep it like this. I want to go ahead and rewrite it so it's nice and neat because I don't want to make any silly mistakes just because I read it wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and write y equals 1/2 x plus 6. And again, I made sure to put my x term first and then my term that's by itself just so I can keep it in the y equals mx plus b term, or order. So I have to look for the slope, which is the m, and then the y-intercept, which is represented by the variable b. So our slope, we need to look at our x term, which is right here. And our x term, the coefficient is 1/2. So that means our slope is 1/2. We go up 1 over 2. Okay, so now we need to look for the term that's by itself, which is 6. And that's going to be our y-intercept. And since it's positive, there's no negative or subtracting signs. That means that it's just going to be a positive 6. Alright, let's go ahead and look at a few more examples. Alright, now what I'm going to do is go ahead and show you how to graph a line based off of the slope-intercept form. So first of all, we have y equals 1/3 x plus 1. Now, the first thing you want to do is check to make sure that your equation is in the slope-intercept form, which we have our y equals mx plus b. So it's in the right form, so I don't have to do anything to the equation first. So now I'm going to go ahead and pick out the slope and the y-intercept. So my slope, which is represented by m, is 1/3 because it is the coefficient of x, so that's how I knew that was the slope. And now I'm going to look for the term that's by itself, which is 1, which that means that's our y-intercept. Y-intercept, which is represented by b actually, and that's going to be a positive 1. So now the first thing you want to do is look at your y-intercept. That's going to be first. Okay, so now y-intercept is 1, so that means that I need to look at my y-axis, which is this vertical line here. And we're going to go up 1 unit. So I'm going to go up 1, and there's my y-intercept. That's all you have to do. You don't have to go left or right because you want to make sure that it's on the y-axis. So at 1. So now we need to go ahead and take our slope. So what I'm going to write this out just to remind myself. The numerator means that I'm going to go up 1, and the bottom means I'm going to go right 3. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and go up 1 unit, which is right here, and I'm going to go right 3 units. 1, 2, 3. So that means my second point is right here. I'm going to do it again a few more times just so I can make sure my line is a little more accurate. I'm going to go up 1 unit, and I'm going to go right 1, 2, 3. There's another point. So that means that anytime I do that, go up and over 3, those are all points that are on the same line. So I'm going to go ahead and connect them to make my line. Now I want to make it nice and neat by using a ruler. And there is my line. Alright, let's go ahead and look at another example. So in this case, it says, a t-shirt company charges a design fee of $24 for a pattern and then sells the shirts for $12 each. The total cost, which is the y, can be represented by y equals 12x times, or plus 24, where x represents the number of t-shirts. So first things first, we're going to take this equation and we're going to graph it just like we did last time, the last example. So they gave you the equation, so don't start reading it and get stressed out because you realize that they gave you the equation at the end. So let's start with this equation. So it says y equals 12x plus 24. So first of all, I need to find my slope, which is slope is 12. So that means that's actually 12 over 1. So we're going up 12 units and right 1 unit. So it's kind of a big graph here. And then we look at our y-intercept. So b is equal to 24. So first things first, I want to look at my y-intercept first. I'm going to go up to 24. So here's my first point. And now I need to go ahead and use my slope. I want to go up, I'm going to find a way to write this, up 12 and right 1. Now the reason why I write this out is just to remind myself what that numerator and denominator stands for, so that when I'm looking for my next step, it's easy. I'll be just like, oh, okay, first I'm going to go up 12, so I'm going to go up 2, 4, notice that on my y-axis I'm going up by 2, So that means I'm going to go up 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. And now I'm going to go to the right one. So if you see, my graph is actually quite steep because I went up a lot more than I went over. So I have a pretty steep graph here. I'm going to go ahead and connect them with a nice ruler to make it nice and neat. And there's my graph. So that's all you have to do. And now let's go ahead and look at, so we already did the graphing, so let's look at B. It says explain what the y-intercept and the slope represent. So first of all, I'm going to say the y-intercept represents, now I'm going to write this in complete sentences, okay? So the y-intercept represents what? So first of all, my y-intercept is 24. So what I'm going to do is actually go back to my word problem and see what did they say the 24 stood for. So it says a t-shirt company charges a design fee of $24. So I'm going to say the y-intercept represents the design fee of $24. And then I'm going to go ahead and write another sentence that said the slope represents what? So let's look at our slope, which is 12. So I'm going to go ahead and keep reading in my word problem to see what 12 is. So it says for a pattern and then sells the t-shirts for $12 each. So that means that the slope represents the cost of t-shirts. I'm going to put in parentheses just to make it even more accurate, $12. Okay? All right, and that's all you'll have to do. Let's go ahead and look at the on your own question. All right, you have a few problems to do for me. Number 1 actually has 3 parts. What I want you to do is go ahead and find the slope and the y-intercept and graph each line. So you have 3 things to do for each line. So A is y equals x plus 8, B is x plus y equals 2, C is x plus 3y equals 6. So just emphasizing, you're going to have to find the slope, the y-intercept, and graph each equation. My suggestion is to first start by making sure they're in the y equals mx plus b form, which means that the y term cannot have coefficients and the y and x terms can't be together and things like that. Okay, number 2 is actually a little bit easier than it sounds, but it says Mrs. Allison charges $25 for a basic cake that serves 12 people. A larger cake costs an additional $1.50 per serving. The total cost can be given by the equation y equals 1.5x plus 25, where x represents the additional slices. Explain what the the y-intercept and the slope represent. Now for this equation, you don't have to graph it. You just have to tell me what the y-intercept and the slope represents. All right, good luck. We'll see what you get tomorrow. All right, you have a few problems to do for me. Number 1 actually has 3 parts. What I want you to do is go ahead and find the slope and the y-intercept and graph each line. So you have 3 things to do for each line. So A is y equals x plus 8, B is x plus y equals 2, C is x plus 3y equals 6. So just emphasizing, you're going to have to find the slope, the y-intercept, and graph each equation. My suggestion is to first start by making sure they're in the y equals mx plus b form, which means that the y term cannot have coefficients and the y and x terms can't be together and things like that. Okay, number 2 is actually a little bit easier than it sounds, but it says Mrs. Allison charges $25 for a basic cake that serves 12 people. A larger cake costs an additional $1.50 per serving. The total cost can be given by the equation y equals 1.5x plus 25, where x represents the additional slices. Explain what the the y-intercept and the slope represent. Now for this equation, you don't have to graph it. You just have to tell me what the y-intercept and the slope represents. All right, good luck. We'll see what you get tomorrow.